On a freezing winter night in Denver Heights, the neighborhood was silent. Just drifting snow, dim porch lights, and the soft hum of heaters fighting the bitter cold. But that quiet shattered when a massive snow leopard, white as a winter moon, stumbled into a small backyard, bleeding heavily across the fresh snow. Her breath came in broken gasps. Her thick fur clung to her body, stiff with ice and blood, yet her glacier blue eyes burned with a desperate, almost human plea. Shadow, the black German shepherd, growled a warning. Emma Miller, just 8 years old, blonde hair tucked into her pink pastel coat, froze on the porch steps. No one understood why a wild predator had come to a child's home, or why she collapsed at Emma's feet, placing a trembling, bloodied paw on the little girl's boot, as if begging her, and only her. Within moments, the still winter night erupted into chaos, and what this dying mother was about to reveal would shake Denver Heights to its core. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Denver Heights lay buried under a harsh midwinter storm, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred the line between earth and sky. Snowdrifts climbed the picket fences like frozen waves, and the distant Rockies loomed as pale giants behind veils of white. Winds knifed through the neighborhood with a bitterness that made every porch light flicker as if shivering. On the far end of Aspenwood Lane sat a small blue house with a sagging roof, its windows glowing faintly against the cold. Inside, 8-year-old Emma Miller pressed her forehead to the living room window pane, her breath fogging the glass. She was a small, delicate child, with soft blonde curls that framed her round face, her pale skin touched by the faintest freckles across her nose, and big, thoughtful blue eyes that often held more worry than an 8-year-old should carry. Tonight she wore her usual winter outfit. Her pastel pink puffy coat zipped up to her chin, dark blue jeans tucked into worn brown ankle boots, more from habit than need, because the house always felt a little colder when her mother wasn't home. Emma lived alone with her mother, Sarah Miller, a 33-year-old night shift nurse at Denver Heights General Hospital. Sarah was a tall, slender woman with tired hazel eyes, her light brown hair always tied back in a messy bun, as if she never had time to care for herself. She carried a gentleness in her voice, but her movements were quick, efficient, shaped by years of working double shifts and, more recently, by the grief of losing her husband. Sarah had once been warm, vibrant, someone who filled a room with her laughter. But the sudden accident that took her husband, a quiet, kind mechanic named Michael, had hollowed out a piece of her. Now she moved through life like a candle burning at both ends, fighting exhaustion and heartbreak with the same quiet determination. Emma felt the absence of her father most on nights like this. The storm outside made the house creak and sigh, and each sound only reminded her that the world had become larger and quieter without him. She hugged her knees to her chest and whispered into the frost on the window, "I miss you, Daddy." The wind shrieked outside in answer, shaking the old wooden siding of the house. Then she heard it, a faint cry, thin, wavering, barely audible over the storm. It came again. Not quite a meow, not quite a whimper. Emma stiffened. The sound drifted from the backyard, from the direction of the old storage shed that her father used to work in. She listened harder. Another cry, this time accompanied by a weak yelp. Something small. Something suffering. Curiosity and fear warred inside her for a moment, but then she slid off the couch, grabbed her gloves, and tiptoed to the back door. Sarah was working the night shift, and Emma knew she shouldn't go outside alone, but the cries were too desperate to ignore. She unlatched the door, flinched as the wind slapped her cheeks, then stepped into the swirling snow. The backyard was a blur of white and shadows. Emma trudged through thick drifts, boots sinking with a soft crunch each time she moved. The old shed crouched at the back of the yard, its wooden boards swollen and warped from years of storms. The door hung crookedly, letting thin ribbons of icy wind whistle through. Emma gripped the frozen handle, pushed it open, and slipped inside. The darkness swallowed her at first. The air was colder in here than outside, the smell of old hay and damp wood clinging to everything. Wind hissed through the gaps in the walls like a warning. She blinked until her eyes adjusted, and then she heard it again. A fragile, high-pitched whine, followed by a soft, rattled chirr. Emma's breath caught. In the farthest corner of the shed, curled together on top of her father's old blankets, were two tiny creatures locked in a desperate embrace. One was a black German shepherd puppy, no more than 2 or 3 weeks old, with a dusty soft coat now matted with snow and dirt, ribs faintly visible beneath thin skin, and trembling legs barely strong enough to hold him up. His eyes, a deep brown, glistened with fear yet held a flicker of hope as he lifted his head toward Emma. The second creature made Emma's heart stop. A snow leopard cub, its white fur patterned with faint gray rosettes, oversized paws hinting at the giant predator it would one day become. Even as a baby, it was much larger than the puppy. Its icy blue eyes locked onto Emma with a fierce, primal alertness far beyond its age. The cub pressed its body protectively over the puppy, emitting a low, rumbling growl that vibrated faintly through the floorboards. Emma's knees weakened. She knew snow leopards didn't belong in backyards. She also knew that these two babies weren't just hiding together. They were clinging to each other the way drowning people cling to floating wood. Slowly, she crouched down, extending one gloved hand with a trembling breath. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice thin and fragile. "I won't hurt you. I promise." The puppy gave a shaky whimper and attempted to crawl toward her, belly dragging weakly across the blanket. But the snow leopard cub reacted instantly, tightening its hold and letting out another warning growl, though its body shook with exhaustion. Emma's eyes softened. "I'm not taking him away," she murmured. "I'm not taking either of you away." She reached a little closer. At that exact moment, a voice cut through the storm from outside the shed, sharp, frantic, unmistakably adult. "Emma? Emma, where are you?" Footsteps crunched rapidly toward the shed. The snow leopard cub's ears snapped upright. It pulled the puppy tighter, its ice blue gaze fixed on Emma with a ferocity that sent a chill down her spine. And Emma's heart hammered as the footsteps stopped right outside the door. Emma froze as the shed door creaked open and her mother stepped inside, her silhouette framed by swirling snow. Sarah Miller's breath came in quick, anxious puffs as she scanned the dim interior, her hazel eyes widening when they landed on Emma, kneeling beside two trembling creatures. Sarah, tall and slender with a naturally graceful posture dulled by exhaustion, still carried a kind of quiet beauty, soft cheekbones, pale winter-touched skin, and hair the color of warm chestnut tied back in a hurried bun. But tonight her expression was carved from fear and disbelief. "Emma, what are you doing out here?" she whispered, voice trembling more from shock than cold. Emma didn't move. She shielded the tiny black German shepherd puppy with her gloved hands, her pastel pink coat dusted with snowflakes. The white snow leopard cub crouched protectively over the puppy, its ice-blue eyes locked on Sarah with a warning so primal that even a seasoned adult would hesitate to step closer. Sarah's breath hitched. She wasn't a timid woman. Years in emergency rooms had hardened her nerves. But the sight of a wild predator, even a small one, was enough to make her pulse drum loudly in her ears. "Mom, please," Emma whispered. "They're scared. They're cold. We can't just leave them." Sarah hesitated, torn between instinct and training. Logic screamed that predators didn't belong inside sheds, that wild animals could be unpredictable and dangerous. But Emma's trembling voice and the sight of the two babies, exhausted, starving, clinging to each other for dear life, softened something in her. She knelt slowly, careful not to startle the cub, and examined the puppy from a distance. Its fur was patchy, its tail limp, ribs faint beneath the skin. The snow leopard cub wasn't much better, its movements sluggish, its breathing thin and strained. "We need help," Sarah murmured. "Real help." Emma's eyes widened with panic. "Don't call the police. Don't call animal control. They'll take Blizzard away." "Blizzard? That's his name," Emma said, pointing at the cub. "And this is Shadow. They found each other. They saved each other." Sarah's chest tightened. The sincerity in her daughter's voice carried the weight of a child who had already lost too much. She exhaled slowly. "I'm not calling the police," she finally said. "But I have to call someone." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number memorized from years of clinic visits and emergencies. 15 minutes later, headlights cut through the storm as a small silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Dr. Olivia Chen stepped out, bracing herself against the wind as she hurried toward the shed. Dr. Olivia was a woman in her mid-30s, compact and steady, with sleek black hair tucked beneath a knitted beanie. Her almond-shaped eyes, framed by delicate glasses, held the calm assurance of someone who had spent years tending to frightened animals and anxious owners alike. Her demeanor blended warmth with quiet authority, making her a beloved figure in the neighborhood. When she entered the shed and saw Blizzard and Shadow curled together on the blanket, she froze. The first hint of genuine shock Emma had ever seen break through the veterinarian's composure. "Oh my God," she breathed. That's a snow leopard cub." She knelt instantly, moving with the deliberate, respectful slowness of someone accustomed to wild instincts. "And he's protecting the puppy." Emma nodded vigorously. "They won't let go of each other." Dr. Olivia inspected them closely with practiced hands. Blizzard, around 6 weeks old, was severely dehydrated, his white and gray fur tangled with ice and dirt, his body dotted with small cuts. Shadow, barely 2 to 3 weeks old, was dangerously underweight and shaking with cold. "These two should not be alive," Olivia whispered. "Blizzard must have been pushed out from the illegal exotic facility that collapsed in the storm. And Shadow, well, no puppy this young survives a blizzard alone." She paused, watching the cub curl protectively over the puppy. "They must have kept each other warm. Instinct or miracle, I don't know." Emma looked up at her mother, desperate. "We have to help them, but together." Dr. Olivia's expression darkened with reluctant seriousness. "Sarah, you know this is illegal. Keeping a snow leopard is a federal offense. You'll have to report him to Wildlife Services." Emma's breath caught. "Please don't take him away," she whispered fiercely. wrapping her arms around Shadow as Blizzard growled a small, exhausted warning. "They'll die if they're separated." Dr. Olivia sighed, heart torn. "Emma, sweetie, I don't want that either. But the law arrived the next morning in the form of Officer Mark Walker. Walker was a man built from Colorado's rugged terrain, broad-shouldered, weather-beaten, his gray-streaked beard trimmed close to a square jaw, hardened by years in the wilderness. His stern brown eyes rarely betrayed emotion, shaped by a career of rescuing, relocating, or euthanizing animals that didn't follow the rules of human borders. He entered the living room where Blizzard and Shadow slept curled together near the fireplace. For a long moment, he simply stared, his brows knitting beneath the brim of his worn ranger hat. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black radio. "I have to report this," he said quietly. "The snow leopard belongs in custody." Before he could press the button, Emma darted in front of him, standing guard over the two babies. Her pink coat dwarfed her small frame, but her chin lifted with fierce determination. "If you take one of them," she whispered, voice trembling, "I'll go too." Blizzard lifted his head behind her, letting out a low, icy growl that vibrated through the room. Shadow pressed against Emma's leg, whimpering. Walker froze, radio still in his hand, as the three pairs of eyes stared up at him, one pleading, one loyal, one wild. And for the first time in a long time, something flickered across his weathered face. The chapter ended in that fragile, dangerous moment, between law and compassion, between instinct and bond, between what should happen and what might. Officer Mark Walker stood motionless, his hand still hovering above the radio. The shed felt suddenly smaller, as if the snowstorm outside had pushed the walls inward to witness this impossible decision. The only sounds were the faint crackling from the fireplace and the soft, rhythmic breaths of the two babies curled on the blanket. Blizzard, the white snow leopard cub, half draped over the trembling German shepherd puppy, Shadow. Walker's face, carved from years of mountain winds and hard choices, remained unreadable. But something in his weathered brown eyes shifted. Maybe it was the sight of Emma standing so small, yet so certain in her pink coat, or the desperate growl rumbling in Blizzard's tiny chest, or the way Shadow pressed himself protectively behind her legs. After several long seconds, Walker slowly lowered the radio. "All right," he muttered, his gravelly voice betraying the faintest crack. Maybe there's another way." Sarah, standing behind Emma with her hands clenched tight, exhaled deeply in relief. Walker rubbed his gloved fingers together, a habit of his when thinking, before speaking again. "A situation like this doesn't have a proper protocol, but there's a process that exists on paper. Barely. A special wildlife exemption permit." His tone made clear just how rarely such permits were granted. "If you're willing to submit to regular inspections, reinforced enclosures, safety barriers, liability insurance, emergency plans, and a whole list of requirements that most people can't meet, then perhaps these two can stay." Sarah hesitated. She was a woman who carried fatigue like an extra limb, pale-skinned, with faint lines etched around her tired hazel eyes. As a nurse, she had spent years shouldering responsibility that wasn't hers, caring for strangers while her own life slowly unraveled after her husband's death. The idea of taking on even more, of caring for a dangerous animal while raising a child alone, felt impossible. But when she looked at Emma, at the way her daughter cradled Shadow while Blizzard rested his heavy head across her lap like a snow-dusted guardian, The hesitation softened. Emma had lost so much. If these two were part of what stitched her heart back together, how could Sarah take that away? She swallowed hard. "We'll do whatever it takes." Walker nodded once. "Then we start paperwork first thing tomorrow." Weeks turned into months. Denver Heights transitioned from brutal winter storms to the pale sunlight of early spring, then back to the biting winds of another winter. Through it all, blizzard and shadow grew. Together, always together. Blizzard, once a fragile cub, became a towering year-old snow leopard, his fur thick and white with faint gray rosettes that shimmered under the porch lights. Muscles rippled beneath his coat, and his eyes, icy blue and impossibly sharp, missed nothing. He moved with a predator's silent grace, his massive paws barely whispering across the ground. Shadow, now nearly a year old himself, grew into a handsome black German shepherd with a strong frame, alert ears, and intelligent brown eyes that mirrored unwavering loyalty. They were opposites, one born to mountains, one bred for companionship. Yet they fit together like two halves of a story no human could have written. At night, Blizzard curled around Shadow, his tail draped protectively over the dog's back. During the day, the two groomed each other, Blizzard licking Shadow's ears with slow, methodical strokes, Shadow nibbling gently at the leopard's cheeks as if returning a favor. Emma, now a little taller and braver with each passing month, trained Shadow using gentle hand signals. Shadow learned quickly, responding to Emma's gestures with impressive speed. Sit, stay, wait, come. She even taught him subtle movements, tilting his head or lowering his shoulders, that Blizzard began mimicking in his own way. Walker visited monthly to inspect their new enclosure, a reinforced structure attached to the shed, with steel bars buried deep beneath the snow line. He inspected locks, fences, food logs, and behavior charts that Sarah filled out late each night. Despite his stern exterior, the ranger's beard-covered jaw sometimes softened as he quietly observed Blizzard resting his enormous head across Shadow's back. "Impossible," he would mutter. Yet he always signed the forms. It was during one such inspection, on a late winter afternoon, that everything changed. The yard lay blanketed in soft, untouched snow. Emma played near the fence while Blizzard and Shadow wrestled gently, sending little sprays of powder into the air. Walker was noting fence integrity when a sudden hush fell over the yard. Blizzard froze. Shadow stiffened. Both turned toward the tree line at the far end of the property. A young mule deer, slim and hesitant, emerged from between the pines. Its tawny coat contrasted sharply with the snow, its ears twitching nervously. Emma felt her breath catch. Blizzard's entire body changed, his spine flattening, his shoulders lowering, his powerful tail going utterly still. His blue eyes narrowed, locking onto the deer. The transformation was instant and terrifyingly natural. Emma whispered, "No, please." But her voice carried no weight against instinct a million generations old. Blizzard began moving, each step a silent promise of the predator he was born to become. His paws compressed the snow without sound, his muscles coiling with purpose. Emma wanted to scream, but fear sealed her throat. She knew if he attacked, if even a drop of blood fell, every permit, every compromise, every promise would crumble. Blizzard would be taken, and Shadow would lose the only family he had ever chosen. The snow leopard crept closer, tension humming through his body like a drawn bowstring. Then, in the moment before instinct became action. Shadow barked, a single, sharp, commanding sound. He sprinted forward and planted himself between Blizzard and the deer, his brown eyes pleading but firm. Blizzard skidded to a halt, breath steaming, eyes flickering wildly between prey and friend. The snowy silence that followed Blizzard's halted hunt lingered in the air for days afterward, as if the world itself was holding its breath in wonder. When the video leaked, a shaky phone recording from a neighbor who had happened to film Blizzard turning away from the deer and nudging Shadow in apology, it spread through Denver Heights like wildfire. Newspapers ran headlines about the Impossible Brothers, and local channels replayed slow-motion footage of the snow leopard gently pressing his forehead to the black German shepherd's neck. Blizzard's enormous white frame and piercing ice-blue eyes contrasted beautifully with Shadow's sleek black coat and warm brown gaze, capturing hearts instantly. People began leaving small gifts at Emma's gate. Hand-knitted blankets, letters, children's drawings of Blizzard and Shadow curled around each other. The attention startled Sarah, who had never wanted fame and had barely adjusted to the responsibility of raising a snow leopard and a dog under a legal microscope. But Emma glowed with a quiet pride, not for fame but because the world finally saw Blizzard and Shadow the way she did, as family. 1 year passed. Blizzard grew even more massive, over 100 pounds now, his shoulders wider, his muscles sculpted from bounding through snowfields and climbing the rocky back hill. His tail swayed like a ghostly banner as he walked, thick and powerful, leaving sweeping arcs in the powder. Shadow matured into a broad-chested, proud German shepherd whose black coat shone like polished obsidian. He had become Emma's silent guardian, always walking half a step ahead of her, his gaze scanning for danger even in the safety of their yard. Emma herself had grown taller, though still small for her age, her curls longer, her cheeks less round. Yet she remained unmistakably the little girl in the pastel pink coat, now patched in 2 places, but still her favorite thing to wear whenever she stepped into the snow with her 2 companions. In early January, warnings began crackling through the radio. Meteorologists spoke in clipped, anxious voices about a record-breaking winter storm system, historic snowfall, and potentially catastrophic conditions. Local stations called it the blizzard of the century. Emergency officials urged evacuation along several neighborhoods, including Emma's. Inside their kitchen, the yellow light flickered as Sarah read the alert on her phone. Her brows pinched tightly, exhaustion heavy beneath her eyes. "Emma, we might have to leave for a few nights," she murmured, voice carefully gentle. "Just until the storm passes." Emma stiffened instantly. "We're not leaving Blizzard and Shadow." Sarah exhaled, her shoulders slumping. She was naturally slender, but tonight she looked almost fragile, like the storm had already worn her down before even arriving. "Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. The house won't hold if the storm is as strong as they say." "But they're family," Emma whispered fiercely. "I won't leave them alone." Shadow stepped closer, resting his head against Emma's hip. Blizzard lifted his massive head from his resting spot near the fireplace, his blue eyes glowing in the dim light, as if he understood every word. When the storm hit, it came with the violence of a world unhinged. Winds tore at the siding like claws, and snow blasted across the yard in white sheets. The power cut out with a sharp pop, plunging the house into a murky half-dark. Roof shingles rattled, the old wood groaning under the assault. The storm screeched like a living thing, angry and relentless. Emma refused to sit inside. Wrapped in her pink coat, she stepped onto the creaking front porch with Blizzard and Shadow flanking her like celestial guardians. Blizzard positioned himself on her left, angled broadside to block the wind. His thick fur whipped violently, snow crusting along his whiskers. Shadow held the right side, leaning slightly into Emma's leg to steady her while bracing against the gale. The three formed a small triangle of warmth in a world swallowed by cold chaos. Then came the sound, a deep crack, like the earth splitting. Emma's head jerked toward the backyard. Through the swirling white, she saw the silhouette of an old pine tree, the one weakened by last year's storm, swaying unnaturally. The trunk lurched, splitting in a jagged line. Before she could scream, the tree broke free. Everything happened in the space of a heartbeat. Blizzard lunged like a white avalanche, slamming his huge body into Emma and sending her skidding across the porch. Shadow darted forward, jaws clamping onto the back of her coat, dragging her clear just as the massive tree crashed onto the porch with an explosion of shattered wood and flying snow. The impact sent a tremor through the entire house. For a second, Emma could hear nothing but the roaring in her ears. Then breathing, hers, Blizzard's, Shadow's, all frantic, all alive. Sarah burst through the front door moments later, face blanched with terror when she saw the wreckage. Blizzard stood towering between Emma and the fallen tree, his fur bristling, chest heaving. Shadow pressed close to Emma protectively, as if daring the storm itself to try again. The story went national within hours. News anchors repeated it breathlessly. Snow leopard saves child from falling tree. German shepherd and snow leopard act in perfect unison. Miracle in Denver. Reporters camped outside the neighborhood. Videos of Blizzard and Shadow shielding Emma from the storm exploded across social media. Then came the offer. From a prestigious wildlife research institution, one known for cutting-edge enclosures and world-renowned scientists. The letter was signed by Dr. Alexander Holt, a tall man in his late 40s with sharp cheekbones, dark blonde hair peppered with gray, and a reputation in documentaries as someone brilliant but emotionally distant. He believed in logic above sentiment, and had spent his life trying to correct misunderstandings between humans and predators, though his cold demeanor made him appear more surgeon than savior. The proposal promised luxury, heated habitats, medical care, specialized diets, research breakthroughs, and a substantial stipend for Emma's family. But Blizzard and Shadow would have to live at the facility, permanently. Sarah read the letter at the kitchen table that night, her hands trembling. Emma, after what happened tonight, maybe this would be safer. Her voice cracked painfully. You could visit them whenever you want. They'd be protected. Emma looked out the window. Blizzard and Shadow lay curled together beneath the soft glow of the porch light, snow dusting their backs like fallen stars. Blizzard's massive tail rested across Shadow's spine. Shadow's head nestled under Blizzard's chin. Their breaths rose together in two small clouds. Emma's heart hurt. That night, Sarah placed the contract on the table with a pen. Tomorrow, she whispered. We need to decide. Emma sat alone in the dim kitchen. The storm had quieted, but the world felt heavy. Blizzard rumbled softly in his sleep outside. Shadow snorted a small, comforting breath. The pen shook in Emma's hand as tears stained the paper. She didn't know if she could choose. Morning light seeped weakly through the frosted kitchen window, painting the small room in pale gold. Snow still clung to the glass from the night before, muffling the world outside in a soft, white hush. Sarah Miller stepped into the kitchen with the heaviness of someone who had not slept at all. Her chestnut hair was messy and loose around her shoulders, dark circles hollowed beneath her hazel eyes. She expected to find Emma still awake, still torn, still staring at the contract that offered safety at the cost of family. Instead, the room was empty, except for the paper on the table. Sarah's breath caught when she saw the two shaky, childlike words written across the signature line: "No thanks." Emma appeared in the doorway a moment later, her pink pastel coat wrapped tightly around her small frame, blonde curls sticking to her damp cheeks. Her eyes were swollen from crying, yet when she lifted them to her mother, they shone with a clarity far older than her 8 years. "Mom," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute, "I don't need money. I need them." The simplicity of it pierced Sarah's heart. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the doubts she had clung to crumbled beneath the weight of her daughter's truth. Blizzard and Shadow hadn't just kept Emma company, hadn't just made her smile again. They had protected her, saved her life, filled the void Michael's death had left behind. They were more than animals. They were the last two threads holding their small family together. Sarah knelt and wrapped her arms around Emma, pulling her close as her own tears broke free. "Then we'll keep them," she whispered, "no matter what." News of the refusal spread faster than the storm had. Neighbors heard first, then local reporters, then people from across Colorado and beyond. Strangers from distant states sent messages of support. Someone online launched a fundraising campaign titled "Help Keep This Family Together," featuring a photo of Blizzard curled protectively around Shadow, while Emma smiled shyly beside them. Within hours, the page overflowed with donations, $5 here, $20 there, some even more, from people who said the story reminded them that love didn't need to make sense to be real. Officer Walker visited the next morning. He stood on the porch, his tall frame wrapped in a forest green ranger jacket, snow dusting the brim of his hat and the gray of his beard. Behind his stern exterior, something softer flickered when he saw Emma hugging Shadow, while Blizzard's massive white form lounged watchfully nearby. Walker had never been a man who believed in bending the rules, but he believed in fairness, and he believed in what he saw with his own eyes. "Let's make this official," he said gruffly. "If the community's behind you, so am I." Dr. Olivia Chen arrived later with her warm smile and precise, steady hands, helping Sarah navigate the maze of legal paperwork, safety standards, and inspection requirements necessary to transform their home into a small, licensed educational sanctuary. Fences were reinforced. A larger enclosure was built behind the shed, safe, heated, and sturdy enough to contain even a fully grown snow leopard. Insurance policies were signed. Training sessions were scheduled. Slowly, the Miller home evolved into a place where compassion was taught not through words, but through the living example of its 3 extraordinary residents. Over the next few years, Emma grew alongside Blizzard and Shadow. Blizzard transformed into a majestic, full-grown snow leopard, massive shoulders, thick winter fur gleaming white as starlight, eyes deep and soulful. Shadow matured into a powerful, sleek German shepherd with a commanding posture, loyal and attentive. Despite their size and strength, they kept the gentleness of the babies they had once been. They slept curled together every night, Blizzard forming a white crescent around Shadow, tail draped over the dog's back like a protective blanket. Visitors arrived in small groups: children, retirees, families seeking something hopeful. They watched in hushed awe as Blizzard and Shadow played in the snow with Emma, moving with a harmony that defied logic. Blizzard leapt gracefully, paws landing in soft thuds, while Shadow bounded beside him like a dark shadow cast over white drifts. And whenever Emma called their names, both would whirl toward her instantly, charging back with unrestrained joy. Emma became the heart of the sanctuary, still wearing her beloved pink coat each winter, guiding visitors with shy smiles and an earnestness that softened even the sternest adults. She grew into a young girl who understood something most adults spent a lifetime searching for: that family isn't defined by rules or species or expectations. Family is written in the way someone stands beside you when storms hit, in the way they shield you without hesitation, in the way their presence fills the empty spaces inside you. One winter evening, years after she first found the two babies shivering in the shed, Emma climbed the snow-covered hill behind her home. Blizzard and Shadow flanked her, one a white mountain of muscle and warmth, the other a powerful black sentinel. The sunset spilled over Denver Heights in shades of gold and ember, painting the snow in rippling waves of amber light. Emma sat on the porch afterward, Blizzard resting his massive head across her lap, Shadow curling at her feet with a soft huff of contentment. Snow drifted gently from the darkening sky. Emma stroked Blizzard's cheek and whispered, "I don't need any other miracles. I already have two." Blizzard responded with a deep, gentle rumble, and Shadow pressed closer with a satisfied sigh. There, in the quiet of a winter dusk, an unlikely family remained whole, a living testament to the truth that impossible is sometimes just another word for miracle. In the quiet snowfall that wrapped their little home in white, one truth shone brighter than the winter moon over Denver Heights. Miracles don't always arrive with thunder, angels, or a voice from the clouds. Sometimes, they walk toward us on four paws, one black, one white, and curl up beside a lonely child who needs them most. Emma didn't ask for a sign from heaven. She didn't pray for a snow leopard or a German shepherd to save her life. But God's miracles rarely look the way we expect. They come as comfort in the storm, warmth in the cold, and companionship when the world feels unbearably empty. And maybe, just maybe, Blizzard and Shadow were not accidents of nature or coincidences of fate. Maybe they were two quiet blessings, sent at the exact moment one little girl needed to remember that she was not alone, that heaven still watches over the brokenhearted, and that God's grace can take the shape of the most unlikely family. So when life feels heavy, when the world feels cold, when you don't know where to turn, remember Emma's story. Remember that miracles still walk among us, and God never forgets His children. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment. Tell us when you last witnessed a miracle. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you stories that warm the soul, strengthen faith, and remind us that goodness still exists. And until the next story, may God watch over you and your family. May He bless your home with peace, and may He send you a miracle, big or small, exactly when you need it most. Amen.